all over the place. So it was they pretty well packed their pews. It looked real good and it sounded fantastic. It was wonderful. Different song leaders from the different congregations got up and led songs. And Mike was there and he led songs, and some others. They came from as far away as, I think, Lafayette or Baton Rouge. Oh yeah, there was Mexico and Africa. Yeah, there was some of that too. Okay, we're in chapter 13 of 1 Corinthians, and just to kind of go back and review just a little bit, because we just got started on this chapter. In this, in the middle of Spirit-given gifts, Paul says there's a more excellent way. And so in verses 1 through 3 of chapter 13, Paul talks about the importance of love. And in 4 through 7, he defines what love is by what it does and what it doesn't do. And finally, in 8 through 13, he contrasts the eternal nature of love with the temporary nature of the Spirit-given gifts. You know, and even though such gifts were necessary and an important function to the infant church, the time would come when they'd cease to be necessary, while qualities like the faith, hope, and love would be the things that would endure forever. So our objective in chapter 13 is to see the value of love in our service to the Lord, understand the scriptural definition of love, and to determine when Spirit-given gifts would cease to be necessary. Every now and then, something catches my mind that Dwayne says, because Dwayne reads from the King James Version, words in certain ways in there that it's put that I really have come words for love. And sometimes, as in our society, in our culture, we get love is more of an emotion, and love, everybody has a different definition of it. The reason I like that word charity is because it's an action word. Charity is, even by the definition, other than the things that we call charities as a noun, but charity is an action verb. It means giving something away that's valuable that you have to somebody else for nothing. And it's a really good word for what the scriptural definition of love is. It's a giving of yourself. So I don't know. I just picked up on that, and I really like that word, the way that I understand it. Love technology. Gotta love it. All right. Now try it. Okay. Love didn't replace the gifts. It was the underlying motive that made the gifts valuable in service to the Lord. The gifts themselves were great for self-promotion of the person that had that gift. He'd feel good about himself, or he could do things that others couldn't. But we have that today, that the things that around here in the congregation, they help make the person that's doing them feel good. Not that love motive behind that. What Paul, love adds something to that gift that makes it valuable to God. That gift was still valuable to the congregation, even if they didn't do it in love. If they just healed somebody, or if they just did a miracle, or they just said a prophecy, that that was all well and good. That helped the congregation out. But it was love that made that service valuable to God. And so without love, a person that's speaking in tongues or speaking in prophecies and stuff is just a noisemaker. He's not contributing. And if he doesn't have love, a person that had gifts of wisdom and prophecy and knowledge or faith to move mountains, without the love, it was nothing. And so that helped me understand said in Matthew 7:23, when the people would say, Lord, Lord, didn't we do many wonderful things in your name? And he said, I never knew you. That kind of helps me understand that, yeah, maybe they did some great stuff. Maybe they did some miracles. Maybe they did some prophecies. If love wasn't the underlying motive for the reason that they did those things, then it didn't count. It wasn't any good. So maybe that makes that verse a little more explainable. It still is just as scary to think that your service to the Lord, if it's not motivated by the love that you have for God, then y'all just spinning in the mud. And so then we came to love's positive qualities. These qualities revealed themselves in their actions. And the King James again uses a word here that I like, suffereth long. And we talked about that, how your mother put up with you for years and all of the things that you went through. So your mother suffered long raising you. But love rejoices in the truth, not in lies. And then we explain what did they mean? What does the phrase mean by bears all? Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things. Is he really talking about all things? You believe everything? No, if love rejoices in the truth, that's all of the things. All of the things that God has given us, that's what we believe in. All of the promises that God has promised, that's what we hope for. All of the things that God puts us through, that's what we bear and endure. And we need to do that and it's hard to think of Job going through all of that with the motivation of his love for God. But that's got to be the motive. That's got to be the motive that we have, or it doesn't mean anything. Obeying is great, but if it's not done out of a motive of love, faith, and hope, then we are nothing. But love has some negative qualities too. I guess Paul states a lot of things in the negative. This is what love doesn't do. Love doesn't envy. Love doesn't boast. It's not arrogant or rude. And then in the English Standard Version, you get some different translations in the irritable or insisting on its own way or resentful or rejoicing in wrongdoing. Those are the things that love doesn't do. I also like the King James Version here where it does not count up wrongdoing. Some translations have said doesn't keep a record of wrongs. Love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. I heard a really good sermon by a really old preacher one time. He was talking about things that we should keep a record of and things that we shouldn't keep a record of. And he went through this whole thing about Love doesn't keep a record of wrongs. We've all had that person that can remember exactly what you did wrong in July 12th of 1982 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and reminds you of that about every 2 or 3 years. These are things that we seek to eliminate in our lives. Paul wrote to the, where am I here? Okay. Does anybody think that this is an exhausted list? This is everything that love doesn't do. These are the only things that love doesn't do. So it's more of a list of observable characteristics by which we can determine if we ourselves are acting in love. And I say that, the reason I say we ourselves is because if I try to apply this test to others, then I end up running the risk of being rude or arrogant or irritable or resentful and counting up wrongs and things like that. So all of the things that I try to eliminate in my life, if I try to apply these tests to other people, then I do like what Paul wrote to the Romans. He said, you who say that one must not commit adultery, do you commit adultery? You who abhor idols, do you rob temples? You who boast in the law, dishonor God by breaking the law. For it is written, the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of you.
Paul's using that word agape, that Greek word agape, for the love that he's describing through all of this, as I understand it. And I think we've heard that term we talk about how that's a love that God has for us, is the agape love.
Yes.
But he's turning it around on us, basically, and saying, well, you've got to have this love also. And it's going to cause these things to take place, or this is what it's not. And going back to the root meaning of that love that God has for us, in my definition, it's a word that commentators say often in the Bible at all. Not one of the loves it's not one of the words that's used very much. It's used here. And it indicates a love that is given without any wanting for return. In other words, God gives us his love and really doesn't, he's given it to us whether we want it or not. He's given it to us not expecting a condition of us doing something back towards him. He's given it to all mankind because he loves mankind.
Yeah.
And then he tells us to use that same love as in reference to these other things, the people, the actions, and so on and so forth. And that puts us in a position, well, I can't, and we're guilty of that. Maybe we want something back. Hey, I'm showing you how much I love you, but
yeah,
I expect, some respect back for that or whatever. And that's something I think is that we get off of that. We forget about that love when we're reading through this. We love the term as we throw in there in our mindset. But this agape love that the Bible talks about is the love that God has for us. It challenges us, it challenges me to return that kind of love back. Because that's just not the way we're made or built to be able to do that.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons that I keyed in on that word charity, that that the King James used, because even in our society, in our sense, we think of charity as giving something of ourselves away. And there's still sometimes that sense, even in that, there's that sense of, yeah, I'm getting a tax write-off, or I'm getting, I'm donating to a charity, but they got some pretty nice prizes there that got me to donate this stuff. And it's not just like, okay, I'm giving away my stuff so that somebody else can have it, and I don't expect anything in return, and I don't want it back.
I suspect that all of us, what I was going to say, if someone has really done wrong or something. But anyway, I was sitting in my office one day, and a preacher that I thought I knew pretty well came, and boy, he just lit into me like, I had no idea even what he was talking about. And really, what he said was not true. But, what could you say when somebody just hot-headed and, just rant on and on and on? Well, today, I see what they're loving, and he probably doesn't even remember it. Actually, I had to make up my mind, make a decision that I would not hold that against this man.
Mm-hmm.
I remember it, but I don't hold it against him.
Yeah, and I think that's...
I don't forget about it. I haven't forgotten. But I don't remember it in the sense of holding it against him.
Yeah, I think that's what he means when he says wrongs. Yeah, that would be the definition. That would fall into that.
That is what I had to do.
Yeah.
In all of this.
And that's endures all things.
And the reason I said that, I thought about how much God has forgiven me. And He's forgiven me.
That's what we got to remember.
I have to forgive him. I don't have a choice. If I'm going to be
Well, you do have a choice, but you got to choose the right thing.
If I'm going to be a
Right. Bill.
I wondered about that. Faith enough to remove mountains that don't have charity, and enough to research it. And that's a walk over the tire.
Mm-hmm.
And so that they did, and it washed away. And the guy came up and said, "Boss, it didn't work." I said, "No problem. Get that second mountain back there and throw it in there." So they said, "We can't do that." Well, yeah, you can.
Yep, they did it too.
And they're still using it today. But he wasn't there for love. He wanted to get over there and take time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that aspect of it too. And we can see that in each other, or we're going to see that as we go down through here. Paul is saying, don't do these things because, and apply this to yourself and not to others, so that you don't end up being that way. It's kind of like, I need to practice what I preach. I need to apply to my life, or I need to apply my life to the scriptures. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 2, after I'm done preaching to others, I beat my body so that after I'm done preaching to others, I don't myself become reprobate or disqualified, or whatever that translation might say. But he has to remember that same trap that he's preaching about, telling others not to fall into that trap. And I believe there's a difference. I really believe that there's a difference between teaching others what is and telling others they are right or wrong. Let me repeat that. I believe there's a difference between teaching others what is right and wrong and telling others they are right or wrong. In Romans, it says, let God be true and every other man a liar. I've always got to remember, I could be wrong about this. I'm telling somebody what I believe God said is right and wrong. How they respond to that is their choice. Jesus, there's a balance, of course, because Jesus did attack the religious elite for their ways. And even Paul tells the Corinthians they're not doing right in taking the Lord's Supper. But I don't want to go back to the way that the Jews were, that they had, and God had accused them through the prophets. They had covered the land in blood because of their ways of forcing people to obey their interpretation of the law. Because they had supplanted the tradition of men for the law, or the blood of millions who would not convert to the ways of the religious elite. The Maccabean Revolution in early Israel's history, before Jesus, in that time between the Testaments, those wars weren't fought in love. You either converted to saying you believed in God, or I'm going to stick a spear through you. The Inquisitions, those weren't held in the love of God. They were done by the church to just brutalize people. The Crusades were not fought for the love of God. And then we come to today, and there was many an article in publications of men in the 20th century in the Lord's church are not done from the love of God. Paul's example was an example right there. You know, the people that are trying to tear other people apart because they don't believe they're acting in love. And it's like the man in the company that they gave the award to for being the most humble man in the company, and then took it away from him because he accepted it. So I don't want this to be a true statement, that the name of God is blasphemed among the Gentiles because of me.
I think, Ron, your initial point there is very, is a key factor. If we think about, and I can relate to it, somebody tells you that you're wrong, or you're not doing this right, or that sort of thing. It can be religious, it can be a religious thing, or it can be a secular thing.
Sure.
You know, if they approach you in that, our human nature is, our first response is to get angry probably, and we resist it. And in some cases, we may come around to it, but a lot of times we totally reject that position that that person takes. And therefore, we have hard feelings towards them. They generate that. But the other side of that coin is it could be the same subject, it could be the same issue. But if somebody is teaching and you learn it through the teaching, then your own mind, you change your own mind about that issue. You decide because of your education, learning about it, hey, I'm not right on that particular issue. Here it is. You know, it's revealed to you through learning rather than through somebody pointing a finger at you and saying that.
Yes.
And you become receptive to it if you learn it, if you realize, hey, I am wrong, you know, that through an educational process of teaching, not through condemnation.
Absolutely. You know, I heard a preacher say one time, don't correct somebody unless you're absolutely, positively sure in your own heart you love that person. Because then it's not going to be taken right. We're going to dig our heels in. But if we know that that person's coming to us from love, we know who that person is. We know their heart. We know that person loves us. When they say, are you sure you're doing this right? You know, is this is what God says? Are you doing that? Because it doesn't look like it. We're a lot more receptive. We're a lot more receptive than somebody saying, you know, somebody else's parent tells me I was doing wrong. I dig my heels in. My own mom tell me I'm doing wrong. I know where that's coming from. And so there's that. That's what makes love so much the fuel that makes the gifts valuable. Um, and that's what his third point is that the permanency. I can't get my. Okay, we'll do this. The permanency of love. It never falls from its place. That's kind of the Greek meaning to that word agape, is that it doesn't fall. It doesn't fall from its place. The permanency of love and the solvency of all of these other things. The main difference between God's love being poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit in Romans 5:5 and Spirit-given gifts. Love never ends. The gifts would be rendered idle, inoperative. They would be. That's what he means. That word means, like, that word literally means unemployed, but the gifts would be rendered idle, inoperative, or cease to be, but not the love that made them useful. That was the thing that was going to endure. What is that which is in part referred to? When he says, now we're down into, I think, 14. Partial knowledge, partial revelation. But then I got into things like, okay, what's partial healing? Or partial miracle? Or I think you have to contrast it with where am I? That which is perfect. The word perfect meaning complete. So that which is partial is going to mean that it hasn't been perfected yet. It's not complete. It's not the whole revelation of God. Yeah, knowledge and revelation and that type of thing.
Know in part, he's including himself, we prophesy in part, we know in part, we prophesy in part. But we're going to know later on.
Yes, and even then, I mean, if we want to know the whole thing if we want to know everything about something that God's will does, can we go just to one text and learn it? Or do we have to search the scriptures to find out what the whole truth is about that thing? That's a mistake a lot of people make in the religious world today, is that they just go to one spot, they pull out something out of the context of it, and that's what they go with, and they build their whole paradigm around something that is just partial, and not understanding that the Bible's not written in encyclopedia form. It's you have to search the whole scripture to find out what God says about that.
This whole thing is talking about completeness of maturity and so on. And Paul does Gentiles come into it. The word perfect, we can say it applies to different things, but here certainly knowledge and looks like we becoming mature if you're have love. And, you know, if your love is that idolatry, it seems like some of this is just wrong.
Yeah, and that might be why Paul wanted the letters circulated. He wanted his letters circulated among the churches because he didn't tell the Ephesians everything. He didn't tell the Laodiceans everything or the Corinthians everything. But if they circulated their letters, they could see what he was telling each other just as we can today. And that's why when that all came together, because even now, we don't have all knowledge. All knowledge, we have it, but we haven't dug it out yet. I mean, it's there in the book. We got all the whole revelation of God, but it might take a lifetime to just scratch the surface of that. I mean, God can't be contained between two pieces of leather, but everything that we can know about him is contained there, and that could take a lifetime. And that's what, you know, all Spirit-given gifts were just temporary to help the infant church make that transition between childhood and maturity. So then what does that tells us kind of then what does that which is perfect refer to? The complete revelation of God, or the complete knowledge. Why is it unlikely that which is perfect is to come refers to Christ or heaven? Some people think that when it says, so when that which is perfect comes, that which is partial will be done away with. So that's why they still have all of these Spirit-given gifts, because Christ hasn't come yet. Heaven hasn't come yet. The perfect hasn't come yet. Why is that unlikely that that's what he's trying to say here?
When I was doing graduate work, I came across articles in what they say, borrow from somebody else, about this perfect and the perfect. And I found articles by brothers in Christ who had written 4 or 5 different opinions, at least 4 about that. It was really, I never come across it. But I don't remember what they all were, but it's just that, you know, some people think this and that, and they can come up with a reason or evidence for it.
I think what drives that problem is that is referring to Christ coming. Goes on, is enhanced, or is generated by the doctrine of the 1,000-year reign, premillennial. And so therefore, with that there's a lot of things about the scriptures that the way they're believed and the way they're translated is done because of a preconceived notion that we have about events and how things are going to play themselves out. And so therefore, this is believed that way because there is another belief that's going to tell them that it's not time yet. Christ is going to come back and he's going to reign 1,000 years. There's going to be some things happening then. So the kingdom hasn't even come in those folks' minds. The kingdom has not come yet. It won't come until Christ comes back. So that's how.
Yeah.
And so that changes your perception of how you interpret a lot of other things. That puts people in that situation.
Yeah, they have used it as a proof text they start with their idea and then they look for the text to prove their idea. That type of backwards, a lot of science is done like that too.
I just want to say that, just in my studies and teaching and everything, this particular, what we're talking about with prophecies and miracles, everything was done in part simply because we didn't have the full knowledge, because we didn't have the fullness of the scriptures. In particular, my understanding and my studies tell me that he's talking about the scriptures, God's word. It's not perfect yet, but not in our way, not man's way. We have everything, we have everything for godliness and knowledge that we need to be saved and to stay saved. God continues to bring that knowledge as time goes on. And so the word is now complete. He's referring to God's word.
I agree. And just because of the simple thing of what he follows up with at the very end, because Paul speaks of faith, hope, and love remaining after the spirit gifts have ceased, the spirit-given gifts have ceased, that the nature of faith, Hebrews 11:1, and hope, Romans 8:24, will cease to exist when Christ comes again. So if that which is perfect is come means Christ or heaven, then the verse 13 is meaningless. That these things are going to endure after the perfect has come. And then they will cease. So I just kind of took it as a simple thing that this sentence wouldn't make any sense if this premise were true. And so I put those two together like that. But it could be similar to dual meaning prophecies of the Old Testament, where, the prophecy was the foretelling what was going to happen right there. That's the mountain that they can see. Yeah, and they didn't see all of this that was going to happen in the background. We can't either. So this is one of those that could be something like that. I believe it's more in keeping with the context to understand it, to refer to the complete revelation of God's will, the Word, His Bible, the Bible that we have, rather than something that I know is coming in the future, but I don't know. I still hope I will know and understand more and more about God as I am being perfected. Paul talks about that in other places. But by the time he was done with the Ephesian elders, he said, I didn't hold back from telling you the whole gospel. So the whole gospel has been revealed. It's been written down, and now we have it together. And then he gives us 5 minutes to finish. These two illustrations kind of help us understand the temporary state of spirit-given gifts. When I was a child, I needed certain things. The temporary state of that, this is a secular example I came up with. As a child, my dad taught me how to hunt. He let me use his rifle. He held me from behind and he showed me how to aim. He told me how to hold things. He gave me special instructions from his vast knowledge, whispered in my ear, to get me started. But at some point, that special help was no longer necessary. But what remained, and still, is the love that he imparted when he was doing that. He was teaching me how he wanted me to do these things. The love for the animals, the love for the outdoors, the love that came from his voice instructing me. Now I have my own gun. I can aim for myself. And all of those whispered instructions are still committed to memory. Just owning a rifle didn't make me a hunter. Just owning a Bible doesn't make me a Christian. So I apply that stuff to Bible knowledge. If I don't constantly study, I lose the skills that will help me to teach other people the Gospels. If I move to a different area of the country, those skills need to adapt in order to be effective. That's why Paul said that he became all things to all men so that he might save some. But what continued through all of that, through all of those gifts and talents and different things that he had that would evaporate in different situations, the love that he had for the gospel, the love that he had for the souls, that's what continued through all of this. So that's the permanent part of God's gifts to us, is that love. And so then we have this. Enshrined in the Hallmark Hall of Fame, right next to John 3:16. Written on countless plaques and bumper stickers. But is it written on my heart? And does it show itself in my actions? I really have come to appreciate that old English word of charity for the word love. It's not an emotion, it's a chosen act to give to someone else in need. And so that wraps up chapter 13. Let's hear the conclusion of the matter. This is what we learned: the importance of love, the biblical definition of love, and the permanency of love. And those other things weren't necessary anymore, but love was. Thank you.